Hello, this is Paul Chek. Welcome back to my video blogs. Today I thought I would talk about an important topic, and the topic is, what is peace? We're living in a very high buzz world, as I'm sure most of you are aware. We seem to be in a situation where we are consuming and therefore having to constantly work to make the money to pay for all the things that we're consuming being a general word for spending money on things. And in my observations and experiences with thousands of people and dealing with my own life, the result is that we get on a bit of a treadmill where we have a very, very hard time connecting to our center and distinguishing what's actually meaningful in our lives versus what is programmed activity, i.e., the behaviors that are common in society and that are programmed into people through advertising on various media forms or religious ideologies, or keeping up with the Joneses, reading magazines, reading the newspapers, and this stuff just constantly comes at people. And then we have educational pursuits and the belief that I have to have a certain degree or I won't make enough money or nobody will respect me, which really goes back to the four main causes of addiction identified by Angeles Arian, PhD, an anthropologist and a shaman, who wrote a beautiful book called The Fourfold Path. If I remember the title correctly, it's either The Fourfold Path or The Fourfold Way. And she identified that addictions had four root causes. One, and they're not in any specific order, one was focusing on what's wrong, and that often has its ties to fundamental religious programming and trying to be perfect and sinless, and also has a connection to our education systems where we're constantly trying to meet a certain grade to get a certain level of acceptance or approval and to feel good about ourselves, to fit in. So we're tending to focus on what's wrong, i.e., my grades weren't good enough, we're getting critiqued. I can't tell you how many of my students that have been in healing workshops with me, and when I went to do art therapy with them, were just paralyzed. I've had people sit and stare at a piece of paper for 2 hours and grown men breaking out into tears, and almost in every case it turned out to be connected to a painful experience they had as a child or a teenager or in college, where some teacher started criticizing their art and made them feel bad or belittled them in front of other people. So focusing on what's wrong will take our peace away until we learn to focus on what's right with adequate awareness to see the balance in life. Next is intensity. So when we're raised in families where there's a lot of yelling, shouting, physical abuse, emotional abuse, mental abuse, sexual abuse, religious ideologies, do this or God's going to burn you in hell, got to get better grades, and the ... then there's a lot of intensity. So people's hormonal rhythms rise up. Their levels of cortisol and adrenaline rise up. So they're always sprung like a cat in a perpetual fight or flight reaction. And for those people, oftentimes when things get peaceful, they get nervous because their inherent sense is that something bad's about to happen. In households like that, usually when it gets quiet all of a sudden, someone might be about to get punished or something scary might happen. So those people have a hard time with peace. So we have the need to know, focusing on what's wrong. Intensity. Perfectionism is the next one. And perfectionism is a dangerous trap. And it also comes from a lot of the fundamentalist religious upbringings, because parents are always trying to make sure everybody's conforming to the religious ideals. kids have to look a certain way, you have to dress a certain way, you have to listen to only select music, you have a need to perform well in school, maintain a social standard. And there's many elements to perfectionism. The problem with perfectionism, though, is it's always based on somebody else's approval. So even though you think you're dressed perfectly or doing your job perfectly, as soon as somebody else criticizes that, there's a real problem there. So we've got focusing on what's wrong, the need to know, perfectionism, and intensity. So the need to know comes from our constant need to get good grades or learn something in order to make money or get a job or achieve a certain level of academic success to be accepted or to live the American dream or to make more money, which is usually what drives people to a perpetual need to know. And so we have a countless number of people that spend years and years in school learning all sorts of theoretical things, but they never really practice much of it. In fact, research shows that 50% of people with university degrees are not even working in the field they were trained in within 5 years. So when one's sense of self is based on their capacity to regurgitate facts or to impress people with their knowledge, then there can be an addiction to this need to know. So what I'm pointing out here is that the 4 common causes of addiction, perfectionism, intensity, focusing on what's wrong, and the need to know, are rampant in society. Those are all the very things that are very commonly what pulls us out of being comfortable with the way we are and the way we look, or relaxing and not constantly trying to achieve something, or not having to constantly push ourselves to some extreme in the gym, and learning to work in with the same level of awareness and focus and value as we work out. And then with the need to know, we have this constant rational pursuit, rational, intellectual, logical, but it totally denies the unrational, the intuitive, the feeling modes of existence. It denies the need for unbound play, doing things without any specific outcome involved. So, without going further, you can pretty much see that when you look at the number of people suffering from those 4 causes of addiction, all of those are things that wind up your need to protect yourself, to be something for somebody else, to defend yourself, and to constantly accomplish and go. And so at the end of the day, peace just becomes a word. It doesn't become an experience. So really what I'm hoping to share today is that probably most of you listening would love to have more peace in your life and more peace inside of you. So what I'm suggesting today is an exercise, and it's an important one, and that is, what is peaceful in your life or for you? So we can look at it. Physical peace is, and then you would write down, what is physical peace for you? So we're talking here not only about your body, but physical things. What is peace in relationship to physical things like your car, your home, your bills? How do you detach yourself from the constant things you have to do to maintain upkeep and engage physical things, not just your body, but these objects that seem to consume a lot of our time, energy, and money? I would start with your body at that level, though. Then emotional peace is. Lots of people have lots of physical things or even good-looking bodies, but they're emotionally like tornadoes, and I've seen thousands of them. So what is emotional peace for you? then mental peace is. What is mental peace? It's important to remember when it comes to the concept of mental peace that all behaviors are the products of beliefs. So whenever you're having a behavior such as I have to work to make this amount of money to pay these bills, there's a belief behind that. And that belief usually relates to why you're driving a car that maybe you can't afford, or wearing clothes that give the impression that you're somebody you're not, or why you're living somewhere that you can't afford, or why you're spending money on things that you don't actually need. So these are important issues. When you're going to see doctors and therapists, they're usually treating the physical symptoms of ideas that are the expressions of beliefs. Many of these beliefs are unconscious. They're things that are programmed into people. And as a therapist working with people often in serious life crisis, I can tell you that it's not hard at all to track these things right back to religious ideologies that cause a lot of problems, because there are beliefs that leave people in a perpetual state of fear. I mean, how does a person relax when their mind has been programmed as a child that if you break the 10 Commandments or you don't follow the rules of your said religion, that you're going to burn in hell or something terrible is going to happen to you? And when a child is programmed that way, remember, children don't have any defense over what's coming in. They don't have enough knowledge to filter things. These things get trapped in the unconscious, and many people have told me that they weren't religious or they didn't believe in that stuff, but as soon as I evaluate their paperwork, I find all sorts of stuff that tracks right back to religious ideologies. And we're living in countries that are largely religious, most of us. So remember, what is mental peace for you? And that means sometimes you have to identify what peace isn't first. Look at the yang element of it, then see what would counterbalance that. Working too much, it might be peaceful to work less. And you might say, well, I don't have the money to work less. Well, then you have to look at the beliefs and the behaviors that led to you spending more money than is really ideal for you to have peace in your life, because if you don't do these things, then you're going to end up spending most of your money on health problems. And I've seen that more times than I can count, and the world's full of that. Then spiritual peace is, what is spiritual peace for you? To help clarify that, spirituality means a sense of connection to a greater whole. So when someone's got a spiritual life, in the beginning, they feel a sense of spiritual wholeness by being connected to a group, such as maybe a religious group, or a spiritual group, or a sports team, or something like a movement, Greenpeace, or saving the trees, or protecting the whales. And then as that grows and their consciousness grows, then spirituality grows to be world-centric. So now the sense of connection to the world, even though things are happening on the other side of the planet, whether it be nuclear this, or meltdowns, or genocide, or wars over this, or Americans pretending that we have dictators that have to be taken out when really it's just to steal their oil. As we grow to world consciousness, world-centric consciousness, we feel the impact of that inside of us, because we know it always involves human beings, and we know often these things involve the destruction of nature. And at the level of world-centric consciousness, there's a deep sense of connection to all that. So this is what I mean by spiritual. So what is spiritual peace for you? And try to define that so that you know when you're in that state. Now, once you've done this part of my suggested drill here, then you want to go into the second phase, which is I choose to create peace each day in the following ways, so I share peace with the world. Peace physically, peace emotionally, peace mentally, and peace spiritually. So once you know what peace is, the next step is, what am I going to do to create more peace for myself physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually? And any one of those is a step in the right direction. Because anytime any one of us creates more peace inside of ourselves, that's exactly what we're sharing with the world. We're all connected. If you haven't, for example, read or listened to the book One Mind by Larry Dossey, I highly recommend it to everybody. It's excellent, and it helps people realize that there is ample scientific evidence that we are highly connected, and the lower levels of consciousness that are only concerned about themselves or their group or their own nation are really participating in an illusion. And Arnold Patton says, whenever you're doing something that is not congruent with the laws of the universe, you must provide the energy yourself. So if you're living in ways that are disrespectful and destructive to other people because you're unconscious, it's going to produce pain for you eventually, and it's going to produce pain for other people. But the key point here is that if it's not congruent with how the universe works, you have to provide the energy to do that yourself. And that, in my experience, leads to a lot of burnout because a person feels isolated from the rest of the world. So some of the examples of things that you can do. Now, this is by no means an exhaustive list. These are some of the things I do, and I do with my patients or clients. But some of the ways we can create peace is to draw or paint. Many of you know I'm a Native American medicine man and spirit guide, and I do healing journeys with people and sometimes group healing. And here's a painting that I created for one such group several months ago, where I had, I think, 5 or 6 people, 5 I believe, here for some deep healing work. And I took them into a process of using art to exemplify the state that they choose to be in their life, the state that they are willing to create inside of themselves. And because I'm guiding the group, I connected to my soul and asked for the image that I should share with them as the leader of the experience. And so I got this vision of all of us sitting around a campfire. I don't know how many of you have ever been out camping and had the joy of sitting around a campfire at night. It's extremely beautiful and calming and relaxing. And so this is an example of taking an affirmative action to create peace within yourself and share it with somebody else. Painting this was very peaceful for me, and sharing it was an experience of peace, because I knew that my intention for the group was to be around the campfire together. And 3 days later, we all had a lot of hugs and a lot of joy and a lot of celebrating the beauty of being together and sharing things that were real for each other and having that connection indefinitely. So there's an example of one of the ways I not only create peace for myself, but help others learn to create peace. Journaling, writing down your thoughts, feelings, and emotions. A lot of people have a hard time expressing verbally what they feel inside. And so for many of these people, journaling is a very, very great way of moving emotions and moving challenging thoughts out of them onto paper. And it has a therapeutic effect. It's a decompression technique. And then when you work with a therapist like myself or somebody skilled at analyzing these issues, those journals become very, very powerful records of your daydream. In Jungian therapy, working with your dreams and recording your dreams is very, very important, and I do that with my patients as well. But we have to remember that unless you're fully enlightened, your daydream is a dream. It's just, you're just in a different state of consciousness. But oftentimes people look at the things they're doing and go, I can't even believe I did that. I don't know why I bought that. I don't know why I said that. I don't know why I yelled at so-and-so or left my wife or quit my job, what was I thinking? So you can see ample evidence that when people are fairly unconscious, they're walking around in a daydream. And so when we take the pain of our daydream, it's very, very similar therapeutically to recording our night dreams. And we have writing poetry, which is one of my things I love to do. Not everybody's into it. Dancing is a great way to move stuck energy out of you and give yourself the freedom to not conform to having to dance like somebody else or get judged or to care. It's just a matter of rhythmic oscillation and moving energy through you in a way that frees you. And it's very, very healing and can free up blockages in the chakra system, the meridian system, and all the energy systems of the body. And it's highly therapeutic. You might want to look at the work of Misty Tripoli, for example. Great dance teacher, a friend of mine. Singing, as the old saying goes, being happy may not make you sing, but singing makes you happy. And interestingly, I've seen research where they've looked at Buddhist monks who do a lot of chanting and singing and found that it actually has a purifying effect, a detoxification effect on cerebral spinal fluid. So it's very therapeutic for the brain and the central nervous system. Then we have being in nature, which most people need more of, getting your feet on the earth and just laying on the ground, or buying a grounding mat and putting a grounding mat on your bed, or using a grounding pillowcase, which I would recommend both. Having a grounding mat at work, especially if you work in a busy city with a lot of electronics, can help calm you and make it easier for you to experience peace. Meditation of a wide variety of types. I mean, there's just countless numbers of different types of meditation if you start studying that. So I won't go into all those here, but I would say meditation is probably one of the most important ways for creating peace. Stories. Sharing stories, whether you're telling the story or listening to the story or reading a good story, it helps us disengage from the hustle and bustle. And so this is one of the reasons movies are so popular. But just be careful that the stories that you're engaging in aren't adding more stress and scaring the hell out of you in ways that, for example, if you're watching movies about death and destruction, people often get programmed by those movies, and then they are paralyzed because they, at some childish level, believe that the movies are true, but they forget that movies are about make-believe. And then breath work is always a great thing to do because it brings you in touch with your deeper core self. Exercise is a great way to create peace within yourself and to balance and harmonize yourself. Hugs and kisses. I don't know about you, but I love to share hugs and kisses, especially with my family. And that's something a lot of people need to do a lot more. And many people don't even know how to release themselves into a hug. It's amazing the number of people around the world that I've shared a hug with, and they're paralyzed, they're wooden, they can't open their heart, there's no connection. It's almost as though you're hugging a mannequin at the store. And I feel sad for those people, but I always open my heart chakra and give them as much love as I can. So hugging and kissing and sharing is a great way. Just share your love. Gardening brings you in touch with the earth and with the beauty of the plants, and you can see how peaceful their existence is. Listening, deep listening to what people are not necessarily saying at a verbal level, but what they're saying from inside, which in order for deep listening to happen, you almost have to listen to what people are saying like you read poetry and look for what's really being said, because a lot of people are unconscious of what they're really saying or have a hard time saying it. So their words are often circumambulations for what really is the issue. And then worship. Just worshiping life, worshiping the process, worshiping the fact that the pain ultimately gives us an opportunity to mine the beauty inside of us. And most of us look back at our lives and realize we learned more from the pain and the painful experiences than we did from the happy times in and of themselves. Not many people have any great epiphanies eating birthday cake. Yes, it's a beautiful celebration. I'm all for it. But when I'm talking about worshiping, I'm talking about worshiping the process. Life is a process of polarity, and it's like anything. You have to develop skill at life, just like you have to develop skill at riding a motorcycle or a bicycle, or using a saw or a hammer, or driving a car. And if you're not a good driver, you're probably going to crash and there's going to be pain involved, but hopefully it'll awaken you to become a better driver. So worship is really a great way to create peace, because it's rising to the level of acknowledgement and having love and respect for the fact that we're all in this process together. Even the poor animals in nature, by God, we're certainly making it painful for them. And practicing nonviolent communication, Marshall Rosenberg's teachings are excellent. If you go to nvc.org or look up Marshall Rosenberg Nonviolent Communication on YouTube, there's a lot of great stuff. The book that I recommend most is Nonviolent Communication, The Basics as I Know and Use Them by Wayland Myers, PhD. It's a little pocket book, but very powerful. And the essential there is dealing with what is it that I want, feel, or need, and finding out what the other person's wants, feelings, and needs are. And when we deal with wants, feelings, and needs, we find that it's much easier to create peace within ourselves and in our relationships. So in closing, some resources: Personal, Professional, Spiritual Success Mastery Lesson 1, which you can find at the Chek Institute in the PPS section, or you can go to ppssuccess.com. Lesson 1 is how to find and live your dream, but I take you through a mandala exercise to identify the polarities in your life and to look at the 10 components of a dream, so you can identify what is it that would really make you happy to live that way, and what is it that you have currently, but what might you need to bring your attention and your awareness to complete the puzzle of your sense of direction and connection to life and yourself. PPS Lesson 2 shows you all about self-management, teaches you how the mind is programmed, so you can use the same science that's used against you to heal yourself of what I call mind viruses that often make it very hard for people to be peaceful inside. Those are two very, very important and powerful lessons. My Last 4 Doctors You'll Ever Need How to Get Healthy Now ebook gives you a training in how to identify what your dream is, recognize where you're out of balance, and then identify your core values, your code of conduct that you select for yourself, so that you can create the inner environment and the outer environment that nourishes you. And for those of you that want to go much deeper, my Chek 4-quadrant coaching mastery program, the first section of that is up. We're working on the remaining sections of that right now, but it takes you deep into assessing the key archetypes that work through our psyche that hold on to a lot of our programming, which is the imago Dei, the father, the mother, the child, the victim, the saboteur, the prostitute, and then the other derivations of the child, such as eternal child, orphan child, nature child, etc. So those are some resources. These are some of the things that I use and recommend. In conclusion, you'll never have peace until you identify what it is, and then go about distinguishing what it is you're willing to do to create it for yourself. And know that every ounce of peace you generate within yourself is peace you've added to the world, and you can go to bed each night knowing you've made the world a little bit more beautiful. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Paul Chek. I don't know what I'll share with you next, but I'm sure Great Spirit will guide me, and I'll see you probably next Monday with another blog. So thanks for joining me today.